I also, want to remind some of my younger viewers on here how hard to remind them how hard it actually is to stage a general strike in any nation, because you should be under no illusion that this, if you're advocating for it, that this is going to mean much hardship. The reason these strikes come about is because people have finally had enough. And pretty soon in the United States, that moment will arrive. It's not quite here yet, but the people in France seem to understand that giving up your comforts for perhaps 2 or 3 months, probably not 2 months, but even 2 months is pretty damn hard to do, because you are without an income unless you belong to a union, and you can draw from your union fund in terms of the striking compensation and so on. But of course, your opponents are going to hire scabs and people who are just too desperate. They can't make it without that income. So there's always going to be a sort of confrontation between those two forces, in basically pitting working people against each other is what it amounts to. And it was so hard in the beginning of the 20th century to gain just some of our rights here in the United States. Most people have absolutely no idea. People put themselves on the line. Their families starved. Many of the strikers were killed by the military, the U.S. military, as a matter of fact. And this happened just not just here. It happened elsewhere as well. But they eventually prevailed by pushing the issue. It was a very long fight, which took, about 50, 60 years. And with a vision that you're going to have to make some sacrifices now, because things are just going to get worse if you don't do it now. We take way too many things for granted in this country, and we've all forgotten what all these protest movements were about, why people became involved. And these were ordinary people. These were not just radicals, pulled out of nowhere. The working class in America was living under atrocious conditions in the beginning of the 20th century, in mining towns completely controlled by mining corporations. They basically owned the towns. They could dictate what you could do 24 hours a day. And this is what we're going to go back to? The total control of corporations and feudal lords all over the globe, when we've had so much progress. And the one thing some people don't seem to understand is, yes, in protests there will be violent actions, but most of the time when these protests were initiated, particularly in the labor movement in the beginning of the 20th century, the violence wasn't initiated by the laborers, it was initiated against them. And once that happened, you better believe they fought back. And so I'm firmly behind the Second Amendment and gun rights and all of this stuff. I'm not opposed to that at all. Of course, the situation is a little bit different now, given the technology of the military and so on, because you know your little AK-47 isn't going to do a hell of a lot of good once you've got helicopters flying around with chemicals spraying on you in order to disable you, you know, from the get-go. It's a different situation, and it can't, in the long run, it can't be solved that way. But you know, I'm just saying, I understand people who want to keep their guns for their own safety and so on. You know, as long as you're responsible for all that stuff, I don't have a problem with it. And no, multiple convictions as far as gun violations and violence in the home, and no, that shouldn't gain you the right to own a gun. You know, I'm sorry. There's got to be some safety lines in society. So we've got enough criminals running this country as it is. You know, we don't need a bunch of wackos running amok. That's the way I see it. But something in this country is amiss, because evidently people have been so brainwashed by our mass media that they actually believe that the banks and the corporations are going to save their asses. And you know what? That's not going to happen. They don't care about you. What they care about is making the highest profits possible. And if they can't make it off of you, they're going to make it off of some other people or some other country. They don't care. It's all short-term thinking. It's all short-term. Over and out.